delighted here at Impact and Policy Research Institute, IMPRI, New Delhi, and Center for Development Communication and Studies, CDECS at Jaipur. Professor Sunil Ray is also advisor to CDECS and also to us IMPRI. And based on his fabulous work, today we are gathered here for this very special deliberation, which will also be followed by panel discussion, also reflecting upon the issue and also things which are being highlighted by Professor Sunil Ray. So without any further ado, let me just introduce Professor Sunil Ray. Professor Sunil Ray is currently advisor to CDECS, and he was also a former fellow at MS Merian Rabindranath Tagore International Center of Advanced Studies, Metamorphoses of the Political, ICAS MP. Professor Ray was also former director at A.N. Sinha Institute of Social Sciences, Patna, Bihar, a very prestigious organization in Bihar. Sunil Ray has PhD in economics and he was prior to becoming the director of A.N. Sinha Institute. He was also the dean of School of Social Sciences and head at the Center for Economic Studies and Policy at Central University of South Bihar. He was professor of economics at the Institute of Development Studies, Jaipur, and has taught at National Institute of Rural Development, NIRD, now NIRD-PR at Hyderabad, Institute for Social and Economic Change, ICAS, Bangalore, and he was also a visiting fellow at the Institute of Development Studies, IDS, Sussex, UK. Also at Institute of Oriental Studies in Russia. Besides, he has visited several countries on international assignment. During his tenure as fellow at ICAS MP, he worked on alternative development paradigm, focusing on cohesive development. Professor Ray has 35 years of experience in research and teaching in the field of environmental economics, political economy of development, rural development, and institutional economics. He was part of the review mission team of the European Commission and has worked on several consulting assignments with the World Bank and other international organizations. His papers have been published extensively in reputed national and international journals, such as Economic and Political Weekly, EPW, International Journal of Ecological Economics, Asian Surveys, Savings and Development, Capitalism, Nature and Socialism, among others. Oxford University Press and Sage Publications in edited volumes, and numerous other prestigious publications. He has authored several books, including Industrial Growth and Protection in India, 1988, Natural Resources, Organization and Technology Linkages, 1997, Agricultural Services and the Poor, co-authored in 1999, Management of Natural Resources, Institutions for Sustainable Livelihood, 2008, and the latest one is the Theorizing Cohesive Development and Alternative Paradigm, co-edited, which has come in 2020. And based upon Professor Ray's this latest book and his latest work with the German institution, we are so happy and excited to hear more from none other than Professor Ray. Professor Ray, over to you.
Yeah. Shall I begin now?
Yes, sir, you can begin. We are bringing, yes, your slides. Upen, sir, if you like to add anything to welcome.
Yes, you can.
Video is off.
Okay.
Video.
Shall I start now?
No, sir, let Upendra sir also welcome you.
Yeah, good morning. On behalf of CDEC, I think it's good to have this share of Professor Ray, this topic of birth of an alternative development paradigm. So it's good, and we welcome Professor Ray as he is the advisor to our institute. So we welcome him, and we really want to share his findings and maybe his thoughts, his experiences with the whole during this presentation. So over to Dr. Sunil Ray.
Okay. Shall I begin now?
Yes, please, sir.
Let me start by thanking profusely Dr. Arjun, the Director of Policy Research Institute, and Dr. Upender Singh, the Director of CDECS. So it's a great opportunity they have provided me with to share my understanding, my observations, and of course, a critical understanding of this of the paradigm and working out it on an alternative development paradigm. Before I start sharing my own observations and understanding, I would like to just tell you very briefly its background. Actually, for quite some time, I had this problem. Quite some time, I was bogged down by very serious questions, and I was not able to answer those questions as to how to really proceed. The biggest trouble was that the question was, what should be the alternative means of organizing principle, or what should be the alternative organizing principles for the economy and society? Because on the one hand, you find this almost, downfall of this traditional socialist pattern of society or the organizing society and economy. On the other hand, you find this capital system, especially after globalization, how really it has been intensifying the people's misery and the nature of misery. So all this together really created a lot of confusion in my mind as to how to really get out of that. On the other hand, you find the society is so divided, so much individualistic, and so much of what is called conflicts, so many conflicts of the different types, social conflicts, apart from religious and so on and so forth, different types of conflicts. So ravaging the society as progress, and the prospect of civilization growth is something which is increasingly becoming very remote. So then how to get out of all that? With all this confusion, doubts, and discussion, and the questions, well, at the same time, I was doing some study. In Rajasthan, the rural areas, the remote areas on management of natural resources. And I found one very interesting thing that really gave me an answer to this question. And that is something which I like to share with you. And that journey started from there. And that is, in a remote village in Rajasthan, there are some 14 caste and subcaste. They do not have much of interactions among themselves. But when they had a serious problem of drought and the pasture land, the grazing land, Rajasthan is a state where livestock is a very major source of livelihood. And the pasture land is there. And the pasture land where grass is grown, fuel is being collected, is completely devastated, is almost got dried up. And it was impossible for these people to live with this livestock, and they had to migrate. A huge problem. All these people came together, forgot their social background, and they themselves, no NGO at that time. Much earlier there was NGO, but not that time when they started working. And they came together, revived it with lot of difficulties, and then they stopped. They had their own understanding, one village institution, not panchayat, own institutions, how to manage, how to regenerate, all this plan they had. They had a grass market, and at the same time, the fuel distribution. That means that production, distribution, and also at the same building it up, the management part of it, all this being taken care by these people, and the marketing. So it's an alternative market of grass that developed. And now that village, after a few years or so, they stopped going on migration. The village really became not very prosperous, certainly prosperous. They started even selling milk in the month of May, very peak summer. They opened a dairy, and the poorest of the poor people, who are very small, one or two remnants, or one cow or buffalo, somehow or the other, they managed to survive in that kind of conditions. Students, the children, stopped going along with their mother to collect firewood. They went to the schools. and you find there is a tremendous amount of change in the village social life. In other words, and the women's condition also was, which was very precarious for collecting the fuel. They no longer they have to go to collect fuel per miles. They collect it from the villages, from the state itself. But the lesson that I learned from there, despite the social differences among themselves, it is possible for the people to come together to generate a kind of development momentum and see that this there get the benefit of this kind of development momentum. And that is precisely what I could see. I really documented all these things in one of my book in 2002, 2008. And this is something which gave me a great lessons as to how to go about. On the other hand, you find that you find this financial crash at the international level, the Great Recession has come in. At the same time, you find this sort of anti-resistance movement all over the world, especially against globalization. So all these things that on the one hand, people have been looking forward to for a change, coming out from the liberalization kind of a thing, globalization, network, trash. On the other hand, they do not so much of have what is called the alternative theoretical understanding as to how to go about it all that. There are fragmented understanding here and there. There is a cohesive development, cohesive understanding. So that really made me to really write a paper. And I wrote first paper on that, economics of solidarity, economics of the 21st century. The first thing that I thought that you need to have a new economic theory. And that precisely that led me to develop this particular theory. And that's what I call economics of solidarity, economics of the 21st century. It's not the economics of capitalism. It's not the economics of socialism. It is something, a different kind of economics altogether. So it was published in Economic and Political Weekly. That really gave me a lot of encouragement after that. And then when I became the director of ANC Institute, I organized an international seminar. Some of the best minds of the world, they responded to my call. And all these people came, Germany, Japan, India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, then USA, so many other countries, Canada and India, of course, Bangladesh, from Latin America. So anyway, it's a very big, very illuminating gathering and all presented papers. So this has come out as a form of, as a book, already been published. Routledge has published it. It's called Theorizing Cohesive Development. It is yet to reach us because of this pandemic. It's not, maybe that in the month of December you'll get the copies of this book, but you can see in the computer. Now, this is, after that, I got an opportunity being given by a senior fellowship provided to me by the government of Germany, Education Department, Max Weber Stiftung, this institution where the Indian office is located in Delhi. So they wanted me to work on the same topic and much deeper. So extension. So when the book was published, that was the theoretical basis, the ground of that book that I prepared. And that precisely from my paper of solidarity, economics of solidarity. Based on that seminar was, so theoretical construction was made by me, but then it was written in the book. But then I wanted to develop it further. I wanted to go much deeper into the whole understanding of its theory. What kind of theoretical understanding can develop further? So this government of Germany fellowship has really helped me a lot in terms of financial assistance, and at the same time, intellectual, feedback at different points of time, at different levels, is something that helped me a lot to really widen the scope of the study, scope of my understanding, and sharpen my logic, and also deepen my understanding. That is something which is very important. Friends, I'm going to present the same thing. The one which I learned for several months, that I'm going to see is nothing but what is called laying the foundation of a new thought of development. It's laying a foundation of new thought. So I'm going to start with that, with this one. I will be really enriched by your feedback once it's been given so that I can really go ahead with my second phase of this work. But now, this is the birth of an alternative development paradigm. And here I've expressed my gratefulness to ICMP, Max Weber Stiftung, Federal Ministry of Education and Research, Government of Germany, Prof. Arjun, and the senior views as I spoke to you. Next. What is the objective? The objective is to examine how the alternative development paradigm unfolds with a new epistemological base as a result of the resistance movement and other radical transformative initiatives against globalization, and against globalization. And the second, the socio-economic system, and second, the socio-economic system and institutions that create and reproduce unequal distribution of power and perpetuate discrimination and domination by humans over other humans and nature. Based on the lessons learned from these movements, I have attempted to construct the theoretical edifice of the alternative development framework that shows how the rise of another world from within the metabolism of capital system is an historical inevitability. Next, here, the point is that here it's nothing notional. The kind of theoretical edifice I'm trying to create is not notional, like, as you found, most of the mainstream economics, this when they started, even Adam Smith also later I'll talk about it, the mere observation of few things here and there, they develop certain theories of development, theories of economics, and how the economics operate and all that. That I'm going to, but it's something where I have a solid background of what is called the movements all over the world, and I've studied these movements and all that, and based on that, I have tried to really develop this edifice of the new paradigm. Okay, but why this? My structure of presentation will be like this. Why do you need an alternative paradigm like this? The one which I'm going to explain. Why do you need an alternative paradigm? Next is, what are the lessons that are learned from the resistance movements, most of which are anti-systemic, and the radical transformative initiative taken around the globe? And third part is how do the lessons lead me to conceptualize alternative development paradigm, which I call cohesive development? What are its new epistemological base and its fundamental tenets? Then part 4 is a criticality of the fundamental tenets. And the part 5, I highlight how does the new mode of production, I call it a transformative mode of production, emerge. It is beyond Marxian analytics in post-capitalist development stage of evolution of the society. How does the new mode of production emerge? It's different, distinctly different from the Marxian scheme of things. But how do I explain it? How it is emerging. That's the next part. And last part is remarks in lieu of conclusion. Next. Now let me begin by saying that, as I mentioned to you, with the downfall of socialist management of economy and society, you have the capital system all around the world, almost everywhere. And especially this system, has been really become stronger much earlier in the wake of the globalization, liberalization up to 1990s. Now we have spent considerable amount of time. Now, what is that happening? Very briefly, I'm explaining. Many of you should be knowing about all that, but I'm just, as a part of my systemic thought, I need to focus on that. And the most important points. The growing crisis of the capital system is faltered now with its inherent fallacious logic of expansion. Its great recession is there, and though there is no escape route except Keynesian package, which was first provided to withstand the onslaught of the Great Depression of 1930s, its repetitious application has failed to get the global economy out of this crisis. That every one of you know about what's happening to that. Now, everywhere is where there's a problem, you give this money, that much of money, and that much of financial package, and finally, again, you see, get back to the same situation. Vast shrinkage of the real economy, on the one hand. The shrinkage of the real economy is on the one hand, incessant commodification of nature on the other. And the real economy, and it's, if you remember the Piketty's thesis, you see the rate of growth of profit is returns more to the rate of growth of economy. That is growth, economic growth. That is something that mostly financial transactions of a different kind altogether, which has much less something to do with the real economic production and so on and so forth. So the vast real economic shrinkage is there. At the same time, incessant commodification of nature on the other. These two aggravated the crisis. It is the fallout of the growing commodity contradiction between the mainstream development paradigm that works through commodification and the production condition that nature has created. It results in steep decline in the production conditions. Next, commodification causing metabolic rift that in turn is leading to result in deep planetary ecological crisis, ravaging the safe operating space for humans to disappear. That you could really know, this is how the rift is taking place. This is something which is very important for us to know. And that is what is leading to the planetary ecological crisis. Next, social cost. Now, as a result, social cost in terms of human misery, which surfaces in the form of inequality, deprivation, loss of employment and income, loss of control over assets and resources, and more important, loss of social cohesion, and finally, nature's misery manifested in the form of degradation entails cost to the city. These are cost. You have to, in the name of development, all that you are talking about. On the one hand, you see the capital systems has got into so much of conflicts and contradiction on its own. On the other hand, there is a huge social cost which is being borne by the people. And again, I must tell you, there are a number of studies that show it is the people who are living in the lowest echelon, in the lowest strata, they are the bearer of this kind of burden to a large extent. So this is the social cost that you have. The level of inequality, which is now all-time high, an unprecedented rise of joblessness as a frightening scale. I'm not talking about the COVID-19 or the pandemic. It is the part of the system, the rise of joblessness that has been there ravaging the economy for quite some time even before the pandemic, and that is increasing. Only pandemic is aggravated for some time. I don't know what is going to happen, but certainly it's aggravated. At a frightening scale, has surpassed the level of social tolerance. In addition to it, the growing accumulation of dysfunctionality of the system is leading to increase the cost of commodity production. There's methodological individualism, private property, and representative democracy that lend credibility to the mainstream development paradigm, rooted in the same capital system, are increasingly proved to be the enemies of civilization. Anti-systemic movements and the radical transformative initiatives around the globe have embraced an epistemological battle against the mainstream development paradigm, such that the humanity can escape from the catastrophic end through creation of another world. Lessons learned on Marx, what are the lessons that you have learned from different kinds of movements and the radical transformative initiative? The lessons learned unmarks the false epistemological pace of development. False epistemological pace of development, the mainstream development process that I'm talking about, that has pushed the humanity to its catastrophic end. The break new grounds, the lessons now, the break new grounds for designing new organizing principles for the society and economy. Next. Now let me just briefly talk about, I have put everything in the paper in a very elaborate way, different movements, but I just making a mention of this one. Different initiative about the movements of the radical transformative initiative. Several movements took place in the recent past, both at the national and international level. While most of them are directed against globalization, environmental degradation, racial discrimination, gender discrimination, etc., they are all against the exploitative system. They were anti-systemic. Of course, several resistance movements are organized in several parts of the world that went against global system, while some others not. The anti-globalization movement being organized by ATTAC that initiated the first World Social Forum in the Porto Alegre in 2001 suggests how solidarity of the losers, the deprived around the world from the north to south, can create another world with the slogan, another world possible. The global justice movement is another such movement that counterposes an alternative conception of welfare and development to the ones advanced by the International Monetary Fund and World Trade Organizations. Next. So, next. Similarly, immense variety of radical. On the one hand, you find this kind of movements are there all over. I have documented, number of movements that are all over the world in my paper and the book also. And similarly, in India also, there are quite a few movements which are by nature, they're anti-systematic in some sense, around the world also. But now, immense variety at the same time, radical alternative initiatives or to the mainstream development emerged in the last 2 decades around the globe. They range from sector-specific, such as sustainable holistic agriculture, community-led water, energy, food sovereignty, more holistic or rounded transformation attempted by Zapatistas and Chiapas in Mexico. In India also, one of the very important things which I came across in Medak district in Hyderabad, there are 50,000 women from the downtrodden class. They all get together and started experimenting with their what is called different types of means they can survive with dignity. They're all women for the ST communities and all that. Something is a very interesting experiment they have been doing for several years. And they have been able to succeed. That is the kind of thing which is worth exemplifying. There could be many other things like this, but they're the radical alternatives. So they're completely different with the mainstream development regime, the kind of practice that you could see with this development, away from this one. The Zapatista movement in Mexico and the new political processes that are set in motion in Ecuador and Bolivia, having been inspired by the philosophy of Buen Vivir against neoliberal market reforms, may be cited as historic. These are not only resistance movements against globalization and the exploitative systemic order, but also have different cosmic vision that provides alternative development epistemology. They are unique in several ways, and hence it is rewarding to draw certain lessons from this cosmovision that echoes other anti-systemic movements. Next. The Zapatista movement, I'm focusing on the Zapatista movement, which has given me a lot of lessons. Apart from Zapatista, there are other countries also that I'm going to mention about. The Zapatista movement in Mexico in early 1990s is another anti-systemic movement after 1840. It is differentiation. It is different from many other movements that are essentially reformist movement. This is followed by, 1840, you have got French Revolution. That is a kind of a thing. But then after 1840, you had anti-systemic movements like, in Europe in 1968, in Russian movements in China and so on and so forth. But what happens after 1840, there is all these movements, at one point of time, they all started with, with the objective, the overthrowing, capturing the power, the state power. On the other hand, they wanted to do what is called, remove inequality, social discrimination, so on and so forth. The social equality, economic equality, that is what they attempted, the two different objectives. Now, in many cases, they have been able to capture the power, but they could not really, address the problem of poverty, inequality, and so on and so forth. The social discrimination that still continued, therefore the second objective was not achieved. So in certain sense, some people say they are not anti-systemic, if it's anti-systemic, but with the Zapatista movement is different type, is trying to, it addresses both the situations, like not the capturing the power, but also they want to uproot the power, just develop a different parallel system of power relation. And at the same time, what is called social discrimination, economic discrimination and inequality, all that they wanted to remove and all that. So it is different from many other movements, and therefore they are not the reformist movement. This was followed by the new political process in Ecuador and Bolivia under the influence of the philosophy of Buen Vivir, and that is being called sumac quasi in French, good life or living well, but not living better. The philosophy is something very important for us to learn. Live well, but not live better. Not better than others, but try to live well. That's the philosophy. That's something which is steady, coming from the, what's called this Ecuador and the indigenous people's philosophy, something that really has tremendous influence on Zapatista movement, Bolivia, and many other what's called Latin American countries. The uprising of Zapatistas who proclaim autonomy of the indigenous people must be understood in the light of its history of struggle for decoloniality from the system. The movement against globalization reinforced the process and sought reconstruction of the state as an institution from the grassroots. That's the difference. That's the difference from Zapatista movement to the other types of movement, resistance movement that took place earlier. Several other countries of Latin America joined these countries subsequently to crush the hegemonic impact of the mainstream development paradigm on developmentalism by their pragmatic understanding with holistic cosmovision that transcends modernist narratives, meta-narratives of both capitalism and socialism, just different from them. Neither capitalistic nor the socialistic of the one that you understand normally. It's completely different cosmovision altogether. That is what they're shown next. So what are the lessons that we learn from this movement and the radical initiatives that are taken around the world? The first lesson is that reject homogenization principle of the mainstream development paradigm. Mind it, this is something when is borrowed from the economics. They are the people always, they shape the mainstream development process. And this economics, I am also trained in economics, but I know also, according many of you, that we start learning and how the homogenization principles works. So that shaped the development process throughout, especially in globalization, all the more it has really gained tremendous amount of importance. So I said that what the lesson that we learned from this kind of movement, they say that reject homogenization principle of the mainstream development paradigm, based on which the main model, based on which is not based on the market model of globalization is built, and replace it by diversity and heterogeneity. The construction of hypotheses for development and change without taking cognizance of the real life situation in which diversity rests is an anarchic position that mainstream development paradigm has been maintaining for the last 2 centuries or so. The construction of a world where many worlds fit that echoes the construction of a world where many worlds fit that echoes Zapatista movement is a powerful theoretical abstraction of reality in this regard. It combats the principle of homogenization, इसके नीचे पढ़ो नहीं it's not it combats the principles of homogenization that presumes a flat world under globalization. Now this is very important for you to take note of from where this homogenization principle has come. It is basically from the economics, the earliest when the economic laws are being propagated. And precisely these are born by the Newtonian physics of gravity. And that is what, according to Newton, human beings are atoms. They do not what's called interact with each other. Atoms, so they're indifferent to each other. And therefore, so the gravitational pulls and pressures throughout the cosmos is same everywhere. So individual who acts according to certain principles of market here in India would be not different from the one individual who is there, because in Latin America or anywhere in jungle, anywhere is something wherever the market is there. So this, what is called this homogeneity, that's something which has been pretty much homogeneous. That has drawn from what's called being inspired or drawn from what's called Newtonian physics, and is a atom to what's called this theory of gravitation. That is from where it is being drawn, and something which is very, very basically fallacious, because at the subatomic level, you see there are the objects, the particles, they're integrated with each other. You see, you cannot really protect them out and all that. They interact with each other, and something which is very important, which I'm going to talk again later, but that is something which is very important for us to, it's a quantum physics that talks about. And this is something which is Einstein has brought it out. And at the subatomic, you find that. So when you really consider that part also, purely again from that point of view, this particular principle is something which is fundamentally wrong. And whole economic science still today, from the graduate level to the masters, they are being taught how to really assume the homogeneity principles. How do you have the homogeneity principle? Because you have to really have the linear equations, and therefore the predictability of the model will be certainly increased. That is precisely for that reason it is being done, which is completely barbaric. I would say that is something very different and something which should be completely abandoned. It's a very anarchic position, theoretical position that's being taken, need to be really objective. Now, next. Then रिजेक्ट नहीं उसको ऊपर देखो, उसको करो नेक्स्ट. हाँ, रिजेक्ट नेक्स्ट इज रिजेक्ट, हेंस रिजेक्ट या नो उसके ऊपर इसके ऊपर नहीं ना नो 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 उसके पीछे 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 होमोजेनियस के बाद रिजेक्ट रिप्रेजेंटेटिव डेमोक्रेसी, रिजेक्ट रिप्रेजेंटेटिव उसका नेक्स्ट पॉइंट. No, it is it's not coming.
So the slide number is going like that.
Reject. Now इसके बाद reject commodification, reject representative democracy of the liberal paradigm. इसके ऊपर
सब लगता है कहीं छूट गया.
नहीं, इसके बाद आ गया ना, उसको ऊपर, उसको मैंने पीछे, इसके पीछे just immediately reject homogeneous. इसके बाद
So this is 11. Yes, this is 11 slide number. No issue, sir. You can read it out if you have.
Okay, I'll just read it out.
Yes, no
अच्छा, इसके बाद reject representative democracy of the liberal paradigm, which was consolidated during the 18th century in Europe, along with the concept of private property, individual rights, and market economy as an organizing principles of the economic and social life. This is representative democracy. You could see there how the representative democracy was working in India, for example. You know, apart from the exchange of money and so on and so forth. I do not want to explain or elaborate on this, but everybody knows about it, how this is working. And that's something which is the story from almost everywhere in the world, perhaps. But in many cases, this is not serving the purpose. And this is what we learned from the Zapatista movement. We learned from the Equator and so on and so forth. That is something which is very important for us to really take note of. And you know, this representative democracy, again, how it is during the 18th century in Europe, along with the concept of private property, individual rights, and market economy as organizing principles of the economy and society. Now it has to be replaced. It is replaced by the participatory democracy, essence of which is local autonomy and communal self-rule. Participatory democracy is construction of democracy from the root in which common people can assume power to act upon which they think necessary to do so for their own development. Next. Next. What happened? Next.
No, sir, just ringing. Yes. This one, sir.
उसके पहले.
Yeah.
Then abide by the principle. क्या हुआ? Reject.
ये
तो न्यू बहुत, उसके ऊपर देखो, उसको पहले, इसके बीच में कहाँ गया यार?
Sir, I think some phone issue. No problem.
Reject. इसके बाद ही जो reject धीरे धीरे करो, ये जो reject ये वाला, हाँ. Okay.
ठीक है.
Yeah. That's this much I have already told. Okay. Now participatory democracy that I talked about and all that. Now next is abide by the principles of living well, but not living better.
Yes, sir. Go on, please.
Yeah. Abide by the principles of living well, not living better, as the founding cosmovision of the new development epistemology. It implies the following. If you say the living well is something which is a living well, not living better. We are all having living better. but live well. There's something which really comes out from this. It's a different kind of a cosmovision altogether. And that really constitutes the new development epistemology that we learn from the movements of these people, especially in the Latin America. It implies, what does it imply? It implies the following. It implies that, next, a non-competitive cosmovision that allows everybody to live well, not some live better than others. And next, human beings are seen here. This is very important. Human beings are seen here as equivalent to other parts of cosmic universal whole. This is in contrast to the hegemonic anthropocentrism of Western capitalist modernity. It is completely different. Is the human beings are the supreme? It's no. That is something which is the Western capitalist modernity teaches us. It means that it never distinguishes between humans on the one hand and humans and nature on the other. It seeks to promote horizontal coexistence with nature, the dissolved society-nature dualism. It not only mirrors perceptual validity and reasoning in favor of solidarism, that is between human and nature, but also exemplifies cultural conditioning for survival and development of all living species. Next is the concept of well-being promotes co-evolution of human and nature, and it never considers economic growth as the means of development. Mind it, here I'm trying to be making a point. It never considers economic growth as the means of development. Look at all economists, all being trained outside, everywhere throughout. We all talk about it is the growth that really makes the development. I differ. I said, no, that is not the only source for means of development. Okay, next. Next. Hence, reject commodification of nature for economic development, replace it by the principles of sufficiency. This is what I have learned from this principle of sufficiency. The principle of sufficiency emerges as the basic tenet of the alternative paradigm and works as building block to counter global ecological crisis. According to the principle of sufficiency, means that its technology are designed to meet the end eradication of misery of both human and nature. So commodification, everything is commodified. Everywhere it is commodification. Human relations are getting commodified. And therefore, the price and therefore market, and that is something which is there, and that is creating, and you know the story after that, commodification, conversion of the material resources to production, make more profit, let alone what happens to the people, majority of the people, something which is never taken care of. And that is precisely what the story is all about, the commodification process. Then create. Another thing that we learned from different experiments of the world around the world, especially the radical transformative initiatives, niche institutions with new practices and behavior, since they are breaking new grounds now for creating fitness landscape in the competitive environment for survival and development of the people. The emergence of self-organization, reinvention of workers' cooperative as an independent creation of the workers, not as a protege either of the government or large capital and producers or community-based organization, exemplary growth of such niche institutions around the globe. That is something which is emerging in many places, something which is very important for us to take note of. So, okay, next. So these are the observations. There could be many other observations, but these are the major observations that I could make. And what do they suggest? They suggest, number one, change the coordinates of transformation from the parts to the whole. It should be between the parts on the one hand and between the parts and whole on the other. It is nothing properties. It is not the properties of the parts that explain. Again, according to the dominant development paradigm, the dynamics of the system. The coordinates are changing, the coordinates of transformation. That is something is a very important observation that I wanted to make. Next, follow radically different social metabolic order that corresponds to the productive order of the society, which is sustainable and based on the principles of substantive equality and freedom. Third, the coordinates of transformation must arise from cooperation, not competition, and solidarity between humans on the one hand and humans and nature on the other. The dialectics of progress, next is dialectics of progress of human society, is then governed by the law of reciprocal altruism, not methodological individualism. This is what have been taught. We are being taught right from the school, college days, right from the birth. You have to be selfish. You have to be optimizing behavior. So this is something which has really created a different kind of a problem altogether in the society. So progress of the society needs to be governed by not that, but it is a different one, is a reciprocal altruism, about which I'm going to talk a little later. So it is nothing but fundamentally different from the mainstream economics and mainstream development process. And these are the fundamental tenets. Now, all these new coordinates of transformation together give rise to the alternative development paradigm. I call it cohesive development. Next. What is this cohesive development? This cohesive development is a social cohesion among the individuals with a sense of community and commitment to the objective based on collective understanding and shared consciousness. The latter binds individuals together despite differences that might exist between them. It never falls in line with the existing power structure, which is undemocratic, exploitative, and discriminatory, yielding powerlessness and deprivation. Third, it is not that powerlessness being confined to the economic aspect of human life alone. Is hence talking about monolithic class division. It goes beyond that. Not the class, not the economics alone. It is much beyond that powerlessness. We need to really define that powerless exists in other forms altogether. What is there? Next. The unifying elements of all subordinate groups cutting across social, that is caste, race, gender, religion, economic, political, environmental, would develop a shared consciousness or a shared consciousness and exclusion from various forms of power. So all subordinate groups were excluded from the various forms of power in different respects. It's a unifying element. The subordinate group cutting across. That is some of the shared consciousness, something which is that's very important. The tasks of the subordinate groups, all people who are subordinated or excluded with power, their task is to overcome the cultural hegemony of the dominant groups, preserve cultural diversity, and ensure all social groups to have a voice through democratic means, such as participation, dialogue, etc., ruling by obeying come into play. The cohesive development paradigm replaces the logic of capital as it works in the capital system by the new one that seeks to establish radically different social metabolic order based on the solidarity between human and nature. Next. Reciprocal altruism, contrary to methodological individualism, safe here in this framework, in the framework of cohesive development. Reciprocal altruism, contrary to methodological individualism, shape human behavior and direct the alternative paradigm while it's glued to hold the people, they deprive together, particularly based on reciprocal altruism. It seeks to achieve common objective with a common worldview based on collective understanding. These holds good equally at all levels, including local, national, and international. The alternative paradigm never allows natural resources to be exhausted beyond the limit, where co-evolution of human and nature stops. It is only within this framework that one can conceive sustainable development. That is what people do talk about sustainable development without changing anything. I find them ridiculous. It's something they do not want to take care of the other things, and they talk about sustainable development and all that. Here, unless and until you really emphasize on the whole paradigm of co-evolution of human nature, that is, and within this kind of thing, if you do not really look at, it is too difficult for one to really realize what sustainability is all about. Economic development is sustained not on the basis of the notion of unlimited quantitative growth. That is what is being taught every time in economic to the economic students. Qualitative growth that includes social, ecological, and spiritual dimensions is equally important to be associated with development. Next. So, what are the fundamental tenets that I could really look at? One of the new development paradigm, what I call cohesive development. One, First, it's holistic cosmovision with diversity. 2, reciprocal altruism. 3, solidarity between humans and human and nature. 4th, principle of sufficiency. 5th, new logic of capital. 6th, participatory democracy and communal self-management. Next, expansion of commons. And last is qualitative metamorphoses. Next. These are the 7, 8 parameters. Now here, I need to talk a bit what's called criticality of some 1 or 2 aspects which have been debated in many other places. Now, how do I differ with them? The principle of sufficiency, that is reciprocal altruism. Look, this is where I'm really talking at the fundamental level. And these fundamentals need to be changed. If you do not really change the fundamentals, as Salvo Zizek says, I consider Salvo one of the finest thinkers today available in the world. He writes, he says that within the box, if you go on searching for something, you come from one corner to the another corner. It's something like that. You need to really think out of the box. The moment you think out of the box, you find that there is a very lot of difficulties, but certainly it's necessary for us to really get out of this box and say something very different, which is possible and which is possible and possible to formulate, possible to really work on, especially with the majority of the people who are searching for the roots to emancipate themselves from the poverty, distress, living, and at the same time, undignified life. Now, principal sufficiency here, as I mentioned to you earlier, one of the areas where some economics, sociologists, especially economists, have been raising some points, not on principal sufficiency, but something else related to that. I want to demystify that one. The principal sufficiency can never separate means, as I told you, technology from the ends. It breaks new ground for the formation of transformative mode of production, which I'm going to talk about. It produces alternative development narratives without being fetish to economic growth. Next. Next. Here means a design to meet the to meet the objective, that the eradication of misery of human nature. It is contrary to the dominant development regime in which means are designed to generate more growth and more profit. It is based on the premise that states that growth is not sustainable ad infinitum in a resource-constant planet. Besides, it states that material energy consumption must not exceed the allowable biological ecological footprint to tear apart the biological cycle of the planet to result in planetary drift. I think this is something which is very important for us to take note of. You see, material energy consumption must not exceed the allowable ecological footprint to tear apart the biological cycle of the planet to result in planetary rift. Next. The challenge is to decouple. What is the challenge now? You want development, you want people to survive, you want people to survive with dignity. At the same time, you want to see that resources are not being exhausted beyond a point. Therefore, the challenge is to decouple development from the material needs. Now, there are 2 strands of thought emanated. One is degrowth movement and steady-state economy. They have addressed the same problem, but appear to have them some areas of convergence in this respect with the principles of sufficiency. The principles of sufficiency which I am developing. Now, I could see that these 2 strands of thought, there is some areas of convergence, but I would say that it is something which goes essentially against the interest of the people. Those 2 strands of thought, however, later differs fundamentally with both of them, because principle of sufficiency is evolutionary in its operational approach, and revolutionary as it's a reversal of the logic of capital of the capital system. While both advocates qualitative growth alongside allowable quantitative growth to enhance people's well-being, their approaches are reformist in nature of the capital system, since they do not seek reversal of the logic of capital for restructuring the organizing principles of economic society. Actually, this is the problem. They are saying that, well, this much you should not go beyond a point. And, I don't want to explain more on the steady-state economy, SSE approach and all that, how it is being borrowed for the mills, the classical economy and all that. And, essentially what they are saying that we need to emphasize on the qualitative growth and so on and so forth. Quantitative growth has to stop at some stage or the other, and so on and so forth. That is how they are talking about. But then question is that, while they are advocating qualitative growth and also allowing the quantitative growth up to a point, but they never wanted to change the logic of capital. The question is that when the logic of capital remains intact, is it possible for us to really achieve what they wanted to achieve? My answer is no. It is not possible, and therefore need to depend upon the principles of sufficiency. Next. No. So next is, that's not possible. Okay. Now, next point is that on the reciprocal altruism that I need to really talk about. This is something which is never there in economics or not the social sciences, and also, but something which is very important for us to take note. We could really set in different tone of development with the what is called in the mainstream. Cohesive development rejects self-interest maximizing principle of methodological individualism as the only axiomatic truth of human behavior. The mainstream development paradigm has been teaching the world for last 2 centuries so that self-goal choice is the only trait that guides the economic action of the individual. Methodological individualism, as many of you know, especially the students of economics and sociology, methodological individualism is descendant of the growth of the individualism that was central to the emergence of the philosophy of liberalism in the middle of the 17th century England. Liberalism on which freedom, I beg your attention to these things, very important to you. From where it originated, and still it is ruling the roost of change. And this is in 17th century England. That is when it emerged. The liberalism on which freedom, they talk about freedom. Liberalism on which freedom, progress, and democracy are pillared was basically the British Enlightenment philosophy, which was born to serve the interests of the early capitalist. Its early class commitment on the rubric of scientific neutrality was eternalized and got entry as the founding principles of economics are laid down by Adam Smith, still continuing. Next, methodological version of any methodological individualism. So we understand why the methodological individualism was there, for what purpose it was there. That we know, that we must know also. And then we can think about what kind of model that we should develop. Something. Methodological individualism of any version, mainstream economics or sociology, focuses only one-sided assumption of human behavior and has never critiqued the rationality assumption that motivates the individual to act. It is one-sided assumption based on the recognition of only one instinct of the individual. That is, this is homo economicus, which is self-serving individual, that is self-interest. However, now in between, I think I have put, yes. However, Travers, who originally developed the theory of reciprocal altruism, and several biological studies show that human nature comprises of both self-servicing and solidaristic tendencies. Humans and Homo solidaricus are Homo and Homo economicus, meaning thereby they are both self-serving and solidaristic. Next. So next, genetically, I need to really focus on it more. We need to know where from this methodological individualism came into being, and what is that we have done, what is the mistake that's being done, what is the crime being committed by economists or the social scientists per se. Genetically, altruism originated as a form of fellow-feeling from the very womb of the instinct of the self-preservation. From the same instinct of self-preservation, the altruism originates. Fellow-feeling and ethics are outcome of symbiosis and cooperation, which are biologically true as self-preservation. The axiomatic truth very completely ignored, which is completely ignored by Adam Smith, who founded the principles of economics based on self-preservation as the only motivating force for exchange and gains. This is where the entire mistake starts with. However, resistance movement, and then we have been following the same thing. We have been following the same thing even today for the last 2 centuries. everywhere the same is being called only one part of the human being that we are talking about. But the resistance movements reveal why this is a false construction and how following such development epistemology has led to the horrific debasement of human beings and nature that was never witnessed since the Industrial Revolution. These movements discovered the altruistic trait of human beings can be equally strong to influence his or her rational behavior that evolves in an associational framework. Next, the reciprocal altruism as the founding principle. No, as the founding principle of the alternative paradigm brings integration between humans on the other hand, on the one hand, humans and nature on the other, based on the principle of solidarity between them. Next, the transformative mode of production. Between them. Let me tell you one thing. This methodological individualism was in 1919. It was passed. What is in economics? So after before that, Menger also in 1886 or something that is talked about. But all these things they spoke about. There's something individual and the market. So everything is depending on them. So there should not be any outside interferences and all that. That is something which is very important for us to know. But this is not actually true. The truth is that that is what exactly I've spoken about. And this is something which is okay. Next, let's see humans and nature on that one group. Yes. Now this they have nothing to do with the culture, they have nothing to do with the institution, they have nothing to do anything. Social norms, only the individual to individual, as it is, since this the whole inspiration was being drawn from the Newtonian Physics, and therefore individual should be atomistic, and therefore nothing is there for the outside interferences. And this is something which is very important for us to talk about, that even the sociologists also, and I don't know how it is missing this point, even the sociologists also, I checked up with the entire debate on this of the sociologists. They also talked about what's called, the outside interferences. So that should be there. In other words, structure agency debate. Most of the sociologists concentrated on structure and agency, whether the agency influences the structure of the society or the structure of the society influences the individual agency. So it's something that went on, and eventually they came out with the thing that, well, it is both influence each other. But the point here is that when the sociologists, they never change this assumption that human beings are selfish, and that is the rationality of the human beings. And the second part of it is never being taken care of. That is, they can be also solidaristic, which the Trivers have shown. Now, these are the tenets that have, these are the things. In other words, the tenets that I spoke about is 18 tenets, how they form a different mode of production. And I call that transformative mode of production. So let me just, last part, the transformative mode of production is conceived here outside the Marxian analytical framework of social evolution and create alternative development paradigm with an alternative cosmovision. It is post-capitalistic and or post-development mode of production, which is neither capitalistic, which is primarily driven by profit or capital accumulation, or not socialistic as envisaged by the traditional Marxists. In other words, what I'm trying to say, that post-capitalist development or post-development, some people say post-development, they're all post-capitalist phase of society. What is the time mode of production going to be there? Is it the same type of Marxian scheme of thing? I said no. Is it the same thing, something which is capitalism is going to take up? No. It's a different kind of thing. Here, I would say that a different cosmovision is going to really emerging, and that kind of, I call that a transformative mode of production with those 8 basic tenets that I talked about a bit early. So those are the things. It grows out of the close interaction between the fundamental tenets of the new epistemological base of the development that have emerged, as mentioned earlier, from the anti-systemic movement and radical transformative initiative. Next. It is contradiction between the forces of production of technology and the relations of production develops where Here, the contradiction between the forces of production, I'm just here contradicting what Marxian thesis is all about traditionally, when they historically have seen, but here contradiction of different kind. The contradiction between the forces of production, the technology, and the relations of production develops here, not due to technological incompatibility, but technology improves with the old social order, as has been the traditional account of historical change given by Marx. Here it happens, what happens? Here, however, here it happens due to the exploitation of nature once it exceeds the limit. Social struggle may be an outcome of the contradiction in this case also, but it is beyond being endemic to class societies. In other words, technology-centric explanation of the contradiction between the two forces is theoretical. That is what they call mode of production analysis of Karl Marx, that the forces of production and relations of production is a technology-centric explanation. This technology-centric explanation of the contradiction between the two forces, I argue, is theoretically handicapped to explain the transition of the mode of production from the capitalist to the post-capitalist, unless other productive forces are considered. The significant one is environment and resources, and environmental resources that have limited production possibilities through their conversion. Next. The contradiction between the environment and the resources as forces of production and production relation is resolvable. This contradiction can be resolved only within the framework of cohesive development, based on the principles of self-sufficiency, not based on the technological century. Develop the technology or something. Solo has argued, and there are some economists have argued. But then question is that has its own limitation, something which I have already pointed out in my paper. So but it can resolve within the framework of cohesive development based on the principles of self-sufficiency that never separates means from the end, which is meeting the basic needs of the people. The principle of sufficiency unfetters the productive forces, the struggles against the production relations, that the exploitation and capital accumulation or irrational mode of production. It unfetters. It doesn't fetter. It unfetters the productive forces from the exploitation and also irrational mode of production. It then aims at meeting the growing aspiration of its rational use, which is about meeting the basic needs of the people, the deprived. Next. This gives rise to the emergence of the transformative mode of production, in that principles of sufficiency fairly indicates compatibility between all productive forces, including technology, human skill, knowledge, organizational forms, and cooperation under the influence of new logic of capital. This principle of sufficiency is complemented by four other epistemological tenets in the transformative mode of production: the new logic of capital, culture of cooperation, new organization forms, and expansion of commons. Third is reciprocal altruism, and fourth is qualitative metamorphoses. Next. I'll explain little. While this post-development new logic of capital, the first one explains that's new logic of capital. Post-development new logic of capital originates outside the capitalist system. Its operational motives are determined by several factors that reinforce together to bring about cohesive development. The principle of sufficiency, for instance, is one of those that gives new logic of capital, which is decommodification, a shift from commodification, which is the logic of capital of the capital system. Second, the new logic of capital advocates a shift from alienation to integration that facilitates social metabolic exchange between labor and nature, and between the labor, that's all the deprived section of the population, that underscores achievement of real solidarity. Next. Once capital is seen as being separate from the capitalist mode of production that controls labor and assigned a different role in the changed relational context, it will foster cohesion, not only between the labor and capital, but also with nature, and contributes to the emergence of the transformative mode of production. Last, the new logic of capital never valorizes capital, but recognizes self-valorization of workers. One can see the possibility of workers' independence within capital. Self-valorization subordinates the power of capital system to give precedence to the use value over the creation of exchange value. Next. The second one, that is the culture of cooperation, new organizational forms and expansion of common. What does it explain? It is downplayed. The culture of cooperation, this and that, like, organizational forms of that kind based on the culture of cooperation is downplayed by the traditional Marxist account of historical change and development. It is the culture of cooperation, of comprehensive cooperation, or the emergence of culture of shared identity, which is the cornerstone of the post-capitalist mode of production. I emphasize the shared identity, comprehensive cooperation, a culture of cooperation. These are the things which are going to be really shaping out what is called the new mode of production in the post-capitalist development. The new logic of capital originates from this ontological basis of real-world experience. The next, this is different from cooperation arising of technological determinism of Marx and Smithian division of labor. Marx also talked about division of cooperation. Smith, that is the classical Adam Smith, influenced Marx and said that determination, cooperation for the technological determinism. No, while the former aimed at setting up a process of collective production and a culture based on value practices, that the one which I'm talking about, which are participatory and democratic, and whose horizons are the welfare of the commons and environmental sustainability, the latter aims at maximizing profit and profit only. Next. The new organizational form based on shared identity of the new productive force of the post-capitalist mode of production. It may be the invention of workers. I spoke about producers or community-based organization. It is the emergence of self-organization with new cultural practices that requires creation of niche structure as a part of structural transformation. This niche structure occurs is a very important thing that I would like to just shed a bit of light. This I got from the evolutionary biology. There are two evolutionary, what is called two theories of evolution. One is that what is being called standard evolutionary theory. That is, the environment is being created, and if the individual really rises to the occasion and is survival of the fittest that is talked about and all that. So it is the environment that gives the evolutionary process of the individual species. But there is another one with the niche creation structure theory of the evolutionary biology. They said it is the individual who creates the environment. And once the individual creates the environment, that environment will push the individual up the process, the progress of change. So one is the individual which the environment is being given to the individual. The other one, individual himself or herself creates the environment. I am talking about the second one. It is the emergence of self-organization. For the first one is survival of the fittest, but then Darwin never talks about it. Actually, it is this Huxley and all that talked about what is called survival of the fittest, only to satisfy what is called the capitalist mode of production. But second one is something Darwin spoke about, is struggle for existence, where self-organization can be there, but the environment being created by the individual for their own survival and growth. That is something which is niche creation structure, which is very important for us to take note of. That is something which is really slowly, gradually coming up around the world. The productive force based on shared identity aims at expanding commons, and that benefits all at nobody's cost. This is, of course, different from state-controlled commons in erstwhile communist countries and all that. Very different from that. They're far away from being democratic, which are far away from democratic and provides no scope for social capital to accumulate. Next. Exchange relation, third one, that is reciprocal altruism. This is exchange relations are primarily governed by reciprocal altruism. Exchange benefits both self and others. In other words, exchange is simultaneously both self-servicing and solidaristic. The new logic of capital that originates from the principles of solidarity never allows the sphere of exchange to be the source of accumulation of profit at the cost of human and nature. This is what is happening. You need to differ. The sphere of exchange can never be the source of accumulation of profit at the cost of both human and nature. It is necessarily true. It is not necessarily true that making profit at others' cost is the only source of motivation for the individual to excel. Spaces must be opened up for other dimensions that designed incentives, structure to motivate the individual and community to excel. Next. It promotes a culture of mutual insurance, the third one. The same thing. It promotes a culture of mutual insurance for the transaction to materialize. The reciprocal altruism determines The mode of exchange, the transformative mode of production gives rise to a system of production, consumption, and transaction. This in turn allows mutual growth of X and Y and no cost to Y. Look at Pareto optimality in economics. At the cost, at least 1% to be sourced. So on what basis Pareto did it? Purely notional. If that is notional, why this can be notional also? And if this can be correct, is mutual growth of X and Y and no cost to Y to this nature. It can be true. So transformative mode of production, that is precisely what, based on the culture of cooperation, solidarity, and so on, so that the transformative mode of production is going to emerge in that fashion. So it also theorized as the mutual growth of X and Y, but no cost to Y. No cost to Z, actually, that is nature. Since capital owes a different logic here and allegiance to reciprocal altruism, it may not be detrimental to the operation of the system of transaction, production, and consumption as desired by the transformative mode of production. Here, all tenets are complementary to each other. However, this is unlikely in the capitalist mode of production, where relations of production are determined by capital or what capital desires by virtue of having its control over the production relations. Next. Growth of fourth one, that is the qualitative metamorphoses. This is the qualitative growth that I really talk about, but it has its own background. Very briefly, growth of non-material aspect of human life that originates from human instinct and influences human activity. If enlargement of human activity represents, according to Marx, richness of human beings, the latter can also manifest in the form of altruism, empathy, communitarism, compassion, and consciousness of all oneness with nature and other humans. All these forms foregrounds interconnectedness and interdependence between human and all other species. Discounting the impact of these forms that originate in the spiritual domain of human beings on evolution of the society and economy is tantamount to underestimating the evolutionary process. Next. It is here that one has to go beyond Marxian thought and praxis that have chosen to side with materialism alone to explain transition to take place. In Marxian analysis, spirit is completely separated from matter as against their overdetermination, having had its tilt towards materialism. The essentiality of their mutual constitutivity instituting social transformation is relegated to the background. The qualitative growth, I argue, you could follow the last point, spirit and matter. The qualitative growth, I argue, stem from mutual constitutivity that concerns the material progress of the society towards being more humanistic with enhancement of the quality of life. It demands reworking on the notion of economic progress based on the ineluctable fact of its alliance with all other spheres of life, including social, political, and environmental. As one learns from Vivi, the quality of life must be defined within the spiritual parameters, as mentioned earlier, that go beyond satisfying the human needs of life and fixes the well-being of the individual in the total relational context between human on the one hand, humans and the nature on the other. Hence, it suggests going beyond technology-centric explanation of social transition, accepting the emotions and the relational nature. Next, I'm going to finish soon. Hence, the mutual constitutivity as a new productive force of the emergent transformative mode of production draws both on qualitative growth that resides in the spiritual domain of human action and quantitative growth that embodies material production being guided by the principles of sufficiency. Since the emerging mode of production is not driven by capital accumulation and profitability, its value and institutions and productive forces can be reorganized to scale up the quality of life and bring happiness to all, especially the deprived ones, from all walks of life based on the principles of cohesive development. Next, the last one. Conclusion, I'm not concluding me, but the questions again I'm asking you, the question I'm asking to myself, why is it that the largest majority of the people in the planet Earth has been disenfranchised? What evolutionary transformation process and the economy must choose then? Why it is that they're deprived, and what evolutionary mechanism society and economy must choose that leads them towards the enfranchisement? It is this course of evolution of the economy and society, the paper argues, that the calamitous impact of the organizing principles of society and economy that was architected in the 16th century in Europe are responsible for this disenfranchisement. The challenge is how to change the course of evolution of the economy and society. The characteristic features of the new course of evolution, such as mutual constitutivity, that is natural spirit, reciprocal altruism, self-servicing and solidaristic, and development, qualitative, both qualitative and quantitative, as described earlier, are non-separable halves of the same entangled entity. They can be explicated well by what is known as quantitative quantum entanglement in physics. This is something which I borrowed from the, quantum physics and all that, and that's talk of the quantum entanglement. It is the subatomic entanglement that I was talking about. This is something that entangled. You cannot separate them separate them. Two objects, two particles cannot be separated that way. They're entangled. Even very far off, we'll say they influence each other. That is what this quantum entanglement theory. So here we find this new course of evolution has this very scientific, what is called, support to what I'm proposing about this zone. On the one hand, self-serving, individual and solidaristic, qualitative plus quantitative, matter and spirit. These are not two, they are not different. They are the same entity. Only thing you need to see, because the velocity of spin, if they are being separated, as these people, as this physics talk about, the velocity of spin will be identical, but in the different directions altogether. So in that case, you have one completely different is the entanglement of this kind. Next. These features together demonstrate the entanglement and interaction, maternal love colluding in the form of compassion. The last one, empathy and consciousness. Social transformation with equality and justice are not totally stripped off from the latter. It is at this point of interaction where solidarity reifies that I conceive emergence of transformative mode of production in the post-capitalist era. The inexorable forces of history stand to witness how this incongruous evolutionary process is corrected by cohesive development, the one which I conceive here, the alternative development paradigm in the 21st century. Thank you so much for your patience. I've finished.
Yes, thank you. No issues. No issues. Thank you so much for giving such a very wonderful and very detailed presentation covering so many points, so many theories, and so many historical aspects as well. In the interest of time, without any further ado, let me just go to our first discussant for the lecture, Dr. Amrita Datta from Indian Institute of Technology, Hyderabad. Ma'am, over to you.
Right. Professor Ray, thank you. I really enjoyed your talk. It was fascinating, as much as I enjoyed reading your paper on the economics of solidarity. So I would like to relate your talk and your conceptual framework of the economics of solidarity to several empirical tensions that we are seeing today as we are amidst a global pandemic. And so the first thing I want to talk about is about the capital, labor, and the pandemic. So, one would imagine that at times of crisis like this, it would be a catalyst for the economics of solidarity, right? But what we're really seeing right now is capital's domination, in many ways, literally decimation over labor. So, for instance, where we have a situation where national economies are shrinking globally, and at the same time, you have a company like Amazon, which tripled its profits. Amazon's profits tripled from $2 billion to $6.3 billion right now in the third quarter of 2020. So in the third quarter of 2019, they were $2 billion. So profits are tripling. And you have 6 big tech companies, Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Facebook, and Tesla. And they're coming out winners in the pandemic. They had their value has gone up from $5 trillion to $7 trillion between January and now. And, closer home, we have the Sensex, which has got shot up between March and now from 28,000 to 43,000. So the point I'm trying to make is that, as one reads the paper and one really hopes and expects that a crisis can be a catalyst, but what we are really seeing is something that we also saw at in the 2008 crisis, right? Where post-crisis there was a market fundamentalism that became stronger. Post-crisis, market fundamentalism really became consolidated, it entrenched. And so how is it, and as we know, so that is what we are seeing has happened with capital. And on the other hand, with labor, we very well know that ILO has reported that the world of work is being profoundly affected by the pandemic, that there is economic and social disruption, not only in low and low income countries, but also in middle income countries. We are seeing increasing poverty and hunger. So in such a case, my question really to you is that we have certain social and political movements that have emerged in post 2008 in both regressive movements and progressive movements. So I want to ask, how does the economics of solidarity speaks to or addresses the regressive movements that have emerged from market fundamentalism? And closely related to this, what is the politics of the economics of solidarity? Like, more specifically, if you could explain the conditions under which it may become a robust political choice, as you argue in your paper. So, I mean, that's just one emerging tension I want to refer to. The second part is about altruism, right? This brings me to the second tension really about altruism. So, and you speak of the concept of mutual altruism. And what we've seen in the pandemic really is that in spite of economic crisis, in spite of consolidation of capital, altruism, goodwill, solidarity at the individual level have all intensified. So, you take the civil society's response to the migration crisis. People really felt the shock and horror when they saw like a sea of migrant workers walking hundreds and thousands of kilometers. And you see as a response, community initiatives, community kitchens sprung up to provide food, address hunger through the lockdown. So in some ways, then, individuals exercise their altruism, their solidarity. I'm not sure if this is seen as economic rationality as you have used in your framework, but their actions are spontaneous, rational, and definitely give a new meaning to economic rationality in the sense that you describe in your paper. So despite having experienced economic shock, people open up their pockets, contribute, they are being altruistic. So then how do we understand this fundamental tension between the increasing hegemony of capital and market fundamentalism, and at the same time, the very benign altruism that we are seeing in the crisis, and all within the framework of capitalism, right? And so this kind of brings me to my last point, which is a little bit about economic history and about Polanyi and his great transformation and the role of the state, right? I mean, we know Polanyi has argued in the great transformation that the idea of a self-adjusting or a self-regulatory market is a stark utopia. Such an institution cannot exist for any length of time. And if it does, without physically destroying man, without annihilating human and nature. So in that sense, when Polanyi is talking about this in the context of the crisis, and clearly then we're in a space where he's arguing, and your paper really I think is inspired by the greater idea that to allow market mechanism to be the sole director of fate is really results in the demolition of society. So, but then my question is, when we talk of contemporary capitalism, did the welfare state also not emerge from capitalism? Did prosperity also not emerge from a certain kind of capitalism? There were the post-war golden years of capitalism where both the market and the state were very strong. And this is very different from the paradigm of neoliberal economic development where the state has abdicated its welfare function in performing its welfare function. So in this context, I did find the discussion on the role of the state slightly missing in your paper. So it would be great if you could share your views, tell us a little bit about what you see as the role of the state in the framework of solidarity economics. Yeah, so that's it from my end. Thanks again. It was really enjoyable.
Thank you so much. Shall I respond to very quickly? Because
Absolutely.
you have got so many questions, there are so many issues, and all are interesting, equal interesting. They're interrelated to each other. But I'll pick up the thread from the last point. Role of the state in the whole framework with this one. There's something very important for us to know. As I understand that, state for what? What is the state? Does it mediate the interest of the powerless or the powerful? Let's put it straight. If it really, if it really mediates the interest of the powerful people, certainly you would not believe in the state. First of all, let us prove the fact that it mediates the interest of the powerful people. Powerful in different ways. The power relations. You have a deprived lot. You have millions and billions of people who are deprived from the system by the state. Now, whose interest the state is being? Is a kind of lip services to these people? Or something substantially really power relations being changing? It is substantially for the benefit of the majority of the people who are being deprived. If it is so, salute. Take the help of the state. It is no, you need to antagonize. In whichever manner you think you should do. But the question is that, first of all, you need to prove the fact that, and it's true, it is nothing untrue. It is state is something which not only represents the interest of the powerless. Had it been the case of that kind, let me put it very strongly, clearly, had it been that case, you would not have we would not have breeding society, culture, economy would not turn into the breeding ground for impoverization and also ruthless exploitation, torture, and depression. You would not have been that one. State has a major role to play. But what role the state is playing, whose interest is really being, is something that needs to be first established. Second is that another point which you said is very interesting. All these are very interesting. You see this, you have what's called division among the people, whether the caste, class, religion, all kinds of things. So much of division. Now let me put it that your capital has not been able to really bring the people together. Capital needs money. Capital needs profit, whichever caste, whichever religion you belong to. They simply know the market. That's it. They know the exchange. That's it. They know how to make profit. That's it. Now, in the between, you have what is called divisions among the society. That is creating a lot of uncertainty. That is pushing the people to the brink of destruction. Now, it is precisely here, whether you are sitting on that side or I'm sitting on this side, it is precisely here. We need to bring the whole understanding to one point. You are a human being. I am also a human being. The humanity, it is basically the sense of brotherhood, sense of sisterhood, sense of friendliness, is a conviviality. That is something which is a concept which Latin American institutions have been really promoting, that we are friendly to each other. We are all human beings. So once you understand that humanity, begin to understand from that point of view, it is not typical for you to forge solidarity between the people. There are cases, fragmented cases here and there, where people are coming together only to meet the needs for each other. Let us not let us not reduce their importance. Let us magnify the kind of forces that are working to bring the people together. Because the time has come. If you really want to hit me because I belong to some other caste or I some other children mind it, you are also going to be hit tomorrow by somebody else. It is nothing but killing each other. Let us forget this kind of a situation. Let us create a situation where all living together with dignity is a crisis of what is called dignified life than the crisis of capital. That is something which is very important for us to underline. That is precisely what I'm talking about. When you have a theory of economics, you need to integrate the theory of social life as well into that one. You cannot have an atomistic individual or what Mingar or mainstream economists have taught you and me that, look, this is what the economics is all about. No, it can never be. That is what exactly it's all about. Well, thank you so much. Oh, nicely that you have explained many things, but well, I cannot explain or, but there's something, these two things I really attracted to me. I must talk about it. Yes. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Moreover, it really stands as, Gandhi's position as India, of a lot of compassion and other things also comes to my mind. Also, sir, one thing which really started creating a lot of doubts in my mind, that as we all say that, animal spirit of the market, that is what is also leading this system, or what would be the elixir of life. Or so what in this model, in this cohesive development, what would be that that moving force? I think something we will take up during our discussion. Next, I would really like to invite
Global force. What is the last point you said?
sir. I think we'll come to that. We have a few discussants, so let us have them. Yes, in the interest of time.
Beautiful,
Yes,
beautiful.
yes. Let me invite Dr. Niranjan Sahoo, who is
Huh.
Senior Fellow at Observer Research Foundation, New Delhi. Sir, over to you.
Thanks, Dr. Arjun. Professor Rai, it was really very, I would say, thoughtful and very passionate presentation. I've been reading for quite some time, especially since the solidarity movement started in Latin America. Especially, I've been closely following Bolivia's, Evo Morales kind of fit the way he set up the government and the kind of welfare measures he took and many reform he initiated and the way he transformed the economy and society, leading to a lot of actually drastic reduction of poverty and and many it became a kind of a global kind of a point of debate. And then we have seen also similar kind of attempt in Brazil and many other parts. In fact, in Southeast Asia and other part also, a lot of social movements have also attempted similar kind of without much success. But I say Latin America remains a kind of hope. So I definitely agree with your kind of vision because if you ask me as a sort of person or a human being, I would always like to go back to that system of interdependence and altruism that which you have advocated. And in fact, at certain point of human history, I think most of us were like that until the time your capitalistic mode of production and many other things turned us to a kind of self-centered beast or or what we call today animal spirit of everything just grabbing and accumulation. What Karl Marx said, other thing that's actually has impacted the society, our relationship, and in many ways, especially the human species and our interaction with the nature. And in fact, whatever the climate crisis today we are witnessing is largely result of the nature of production and the way we have organized economics and market principles. So I'm saying on that count I fully agree. But usual skeptic. I'm actually most of the time quite skeptical about any sort of ideas which I feel that needs far more, probably empirical evidence, which my previous discussion also mentioned. Being a kind of political scientist, I would not actually, I'll rather take to you the terrain of, political economy and institutions rather, not into your domain. So I would comment about your idea about the representative democracy, because I actually been writing a lot about democracy for last 10, 15 years. And I work very closely with Carnegie and others in fact, critiquing the democratic model, representative model. I agree there are a lot of problems with representative democratic model, other thing, and especially the way it is actually being used, especially with the capitalistic, kind of
Absolutely.
plutocratic influence,
Absolutely.
Capitalist, the way they control the system and influence. So I definitely agree, that needs change. But can you replace it actually with a participatory system that you are, suggesting? And if so, in what form and what manner? Because that is something we haven't actually seen anywhere. Probably in our vision of Panchayat Raj, we have actually made some attempt, but that is one. It's like decentralization of corruption, and in many ways the feudal elements have actually got a more breathing space, and probably it has empowered them in many ways. Of course, there are plus, but you have a lot of minuses also. So that's one has to see that, and then alternative is whether we can actually rework, probably reform the representative democratic system, because in last 200 years, that is the one form which we have seen. We haven't seen anywhere actually any new form emerging or providing kind of alternative way. and whatever NGO-driven the alternative that have come up in a very smaller scale. So we haven't actually seen the scale. In a sense, we haven't have actually kind of empirical evidence to suggest that whether that the other reality is sort of something that is possible in a larger scale. That's one. Second thing about solidarity movement, things that you have been talking. I think these are very very right way to way, and that's how you empower society and the community. And community will build the stake, not individual. So I agree on that. So while that is one thing we are talking about, if you look at today, there is a pushback against the community-driven initiatives, the NGOs, the civil societies, solidarity, which had flourished in previous 3 decades, is today actually facing a major backlash, largely from the states and the powerful, what you call the bourgeois, the capitalist. If you look at some of the seminal reports brought out by CDECS and Carnegie recently, even Freedom House, about the closing space. In country after country are now targeting NGOs that promotes climate debate, that pushes human rights issues, that pushes about control, community control over natural resources, are now facing. In our own country, you have witnessing last 5-6 years the kind of pushback happening, and the latest is the FCR regulation being changed, and how many NGOs have been delisted, and NGO activists have been imprisoned. So in a sense, you are witnessing a massive kind of pushback. So in a sense, how does your solidarity concept and the entire thing actually holds kind of relevance, and which way to actually push this forward? And the third and final thing, what I actually felt is we have to also look at very closely about the Hobbesian nature of that the way Hobbes defined human nature. It's largely selfish and brutish and sort of a nasty. And of course, I don't agree in principle with every aspect of it. But if you look at starting from the Kautilya to Machiavelli and Hobbes, I think by and large, the certain tendency human nature remains, but that actually probably reinforces and gets stronger in interaction with different elements. In this case is obviously the capitalist mode of production, the way globalization and other elements have actually brought that selfish motive other thing to prominence. What are the elements which way we can actually really try and address that, and then ensure that human probably remain what you said is more like a sort of a moral, a kind of sort of a entity that gives mutual respect and lives in harmony with nature and sort of balance. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, thank you so much. Shall I respond?
Sir, I think we can take few more comments.
Yeah, maybe interest of time. Actually, yeah.
No, I'll respond and then I'll go back. It's a very interesting, very.
Okay,
you are allowing the discussion to provoke me, and you do not allow me to. No, so nicely that he spoke. Very nicely. I really appreciate. I'm so thankful that all of you have really patiently have heard me and then try to argue out. Actually, first, very briefly talk about this one. This is the representative democracy versus this participatory democracy. You see, the point is that let us first all agree to the fact that we need change of the representative. There will be a large number of people who will continue to argue in favor of participatory democracy, despite the all difficulties that is there. There will be large number of people. Now, intellectual community, now it is a great struggle at our level. Very important for us to really explore. I think that today, the whole community, we all of us are searching, that there is no crisis of capital per se. I don't see what is the biggest crisis today is the crisis of idea. We don't have the idea. We are not trying to create the idea. Let us get back to that one. Is it the one which some 2 centuries ago, for a specific interest, representative democracy for a specific purpose was promulgated, something that we should continue to that one, which is not serving any purpose? If it doesn't serve any purpose, then the question that you being a political scientist raise a debate that if it is not, then what is that to be done? Forget about participatory democracy that one talking about, having learned from the Latin American countries movement and all that. Forget about it. But what is the form? Eventually, what is the objective? Objective is nothing but to serve the people. You need to have a system to serve the people. If the people who are being sent by the people who are not serving the purpose of the people, what they are, what the system is, you need to object, you need to throw it out. You need to argue against that kind of thing. A process of what is called argumentation against such kind of a system, for the systemic regeneration, for the systemic reorientation, for the systemic discovery. It is necessary for every one of us at any level to really think something very different, which is really for the sake of the people. Let us not get too much into what is called some confusion being created by the system, by the political leaders, whatever political party is, and we are being forced into that kind of a situation, and we get into that kind of a cycle, is a vicious circle, never been able to come out and think something very original. Each and every one of you is so original in your mind. But then question is that how really bring yourselves together to a point where you can discover something new and start a process of argumentation which is very different from the rest of the people. Let it be objective, let it be criticized, but still you are very much. Now today, the one which I'm talking about, I'm speaking to a large number of people. Now the question is that let somebody put me down and say nothing nonsense you are talking. I'll be very happy. Only to see that where I can be corrected and all that. But the question that is necessary for us to raise the voice and question and look for something which is very new and different. Secondly, because this is the evolutionary process. Secondly, the question of civil society organizations on the very correct that has been there is a kind of thing attack on the civil society organizations on everywhere throughout the country. And I do not want to get into the merits and demerits. That one fact is there are many NGOs who have been able to really generate a kind of development momentum. I have seen in Rajasthan. I've worked closely with the very NGOs and others. I have seen how they have been able to do. If I think that they are not there, the situation is what kind of chaotic situation would have been left with the people to survive on. Now the question is that you can't just dismiss this kind of initiative by saying that, well, NGO has an industry for quite some time. I know that in Africa also, every ghar mein industry banaya, sab log NGO bana gaya. And that something has been the story, and which is why it's a kind of milking cow. Go on, and some people get benefited. That is one narrative that has been there. But that doesn't mean that the initiative at the local level can be dismissed totally. It is something which is obnoxious. I'm critical of that one in the sense that something which is accounted by the people, which people counted in the development process, the initiative, that need to be really taken into consideration, the process of change and how it is. Yes, solidarity. I have seen the experience of the people, especially those who are initiative. They do not believe in what is called casteism and so on and so forth. They are all taking together. Many cases are there. I cannot go on giving an example, but there are many cases where they take initiative. They bring people together from every walks of life, try to do something, some development process. They ignite in the village, in the rural situation where the government never could reach even. I can give you a number of examples in the Rajasthan context. I work very closely with the people, and that is precisely where you cannot discount them. So you need to learn from them how solidarity works. How is it that 50,000 women have been working for years? How is it possible for them to be together to generate a different kind of development momentum? Is it possible? They are not depending on the market, not depending on the government, but depending on something on small things they have developed, and it is possible for them to live with dignity. Let their income be low, no matter, but they live with dignity. Today, the crisis of living with dignity is a big crisis. That is something which the women, and that is what they have shown. And who? It is the NGO, volunteer organization at the local level, they took the initiative and tried to do this one. We cannot discount this impact of this kind of thing. But at the same time, you must see that something which is really kind of a milking cow working, something that is something which really doesn't count, which doesn't really contribute to the development process. That is something which should be careful. But that doesn't mean that everybody, everywhere thinks of this kind. Third point is that, without
human nature.
Human nature, the mutuality of the PC. Yes. Now this question is that you can't expect anybody mechanically to do this, do that. It's a process. Now say, for example, Chipko movement took place. It's something, if you read the history of Hindalal Bhokuna, it's a huge process. Not one day it happened, but there's a process. People became conscious of what is called forest. People conscious of the plants and species. Over a period of time, they started protecting. They started learning how to live with the people. So it's a mutual respect, equate that. Now a plant, a tree, if you just fell, you cut, your punishment will be equivalent to murdering an individual. It is constitutionally enacted. If you murder an individual, the amount of punishment that the court is going to give that person will be equivalent to the punishment that is going to be given to the person who fell a tree. It is in equator. And that is what, again, influenced by the Wu and Gebe that I talked about and all that. So it is possible. It's possible. Who are the people? It's the human beings. People like us only try to do this one. If somebody, some people, some group of people, some country can do it, why can't we do it? Can't we think about it? You know, that is something. Amazon, you see, for the rate of deforestation going on, emerging despite all this initiative by the different kind of NGOs and, you know, different types of NGOs, initiative, government and all that. That's happening going on. But of course, I'm not getting into that kind of thing. But the point is that the mutual respect for nature, mutual respect for the individual, mutual respect for everybody. Is something which we need to learn. And this can be learned only by teaching the story, our children, right from the beginning till today, everywhere, the reciprocal altruism. You can't develop a society by teaching us, by learning how to be self-interest individual. And that is where we are facing today. We are coming to a stage where we are facing a huge crisis of civilization, progress and growth. Civilization cannot grow. There are many studies that have come across where we are getting stuck up just because the root is that we are all being taught how to be individualistic, how to be selfish, how to be guided with the optimizing behavior, and so on and so forth. And that is
kind of stuff, huh?
Yes. So that is, now we need to come out from that kind of thing. It's not just like the religious sermon I'm giving. It is something, it's a thesis, it's a theory. It's something we need to shape up our individual life and something like that. Not that you have to do right in the villages and in the household. Okay, that is different. But I'm saying that argumentation, I say that you need to really first of all blast the kind of development framework that is there before you. How do you really throw that framework? How do you contradict this framework? How do you develop a new framework? And these are the elements that I've talked about, which is very important for us to emphasize upon. Okay, thank you so much. This much I can tell you. I think individually I can speak more, but then this is what.
Thank you. No. Thank you, sir. Really, the political process which, sir, you are really highlighting and again acquainting us to learn from the last 2-3 centuries how it has developed, the representation and other model. What Dr. Sahoo also raised was the problem of scale. In fact, from the planning bodies to everyone is focusing on that. And because of the hurry, as rightly you are mentioning, that it is evolution process. Because of the hurry, most of the times the civil society or NGOs also have partisan behavior. So there is a backlash, which Dr. Sahoo rightly mentioned. The Economist has come out, the magazine has come out with numerous of example across the world. Very, very good coverage, Sahoo sir. But one thing from the experience of Thailand, Hong Kong, I would also like to bring to the notice that then there is also the issue of freedom of speech. When, sir, you are suggesting that argue, so okay, we take the scale part of NGO or civil society to one extent, but then really the freedom of speech, then where do you argue? Where is the space? So really, what kind of framework, or maybe the digital or new tech work should be the solution? But really, ideas has to emerge. Let me quickly go to our next discussant. Sir has, I'm so happy that sir has incorporated the climate justice part and really having symbiotic relation with nature, something what India very proudly teaches to all of the world. This aspect has also been covered in Sustainable Development Goals of sustainable production and consumption. Very important point. And I'm so glad that in today's deliberation, we are covering all these things, and touching upon so many dimensions. Without any further ado, let me invite Dr. Ambika Vishwanath, who is co-founder and director of Kubernein Initiative at Mumbai, and also non-resident fellow, Agora Strategy Institute, Germany. And Dr. Ambika Vishwanath is also a China-India Visiting Scholar Fellow at Ashoka University, also with myself. Ma'am, welcome. Sorry for the time. Yeah.
No, thanks, Arjun and Dr. A. Firstly, I have to say that and please take this in the spirit that it's meant, is that one normally doesn't see this level of optimism and idealism from the generation, from your generation. So I think that's really great.
Remove your hand.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
So I was going to say, it's really good to see that, because normally the older generation, one sees a lot more pessimism coming out of their work and their speeches. So in that sense, I must commend you that you still find room for change in how we may go forward, and how we may reform our education system, and how we may reform how we conduct our social selves and everything. So that, I just wanted to put that out there in the beginning itself. A lot of what I wanted to say, both Niranjan and Amrita had already mentioned. So I'm going to not repeat what they have said, because you've answered some of it. What I want to do is sort of place myself somewhere in the middle of what you've been talking about and the issues that they have raised. And as Arjun said, I work on non-traditional security challenges. So climate, environment, water is
Traditional society.
Right.
Society.
Yes. So all of that comes under what you were saying, and you repeatedly mentioned both in your speech and in your paper this concept of collective understanding, and I think that's really important. So I want to highlight this idea that you talked about, is collective understanding, and about nature and natural resources. Now, some of what you have talked about in your paper and in the presentation, I feel like we're already employing when we talk about water security. And I'm going to talk more about water and not so much about the climate environment, though it's all very similar and interconnected. So when we think of water security, what is the shift that we've seen? And I've been working on this issue for 15, 16 years now. There's definitely a shift from the siloed thinking to a more cohesive, interconnected, cross-cutting, cross-sectoral thinking, right? And that's one of the things that you are advocating, right? So that shift is happening. It's not there. It's not as where one would like it to be, but that shift is happening. So I wanted to put that out there. Also, earlier we used to think of water as a very linear, finite source to be used and abused. We no longer think of it in that sense. There's a lot more circular thinking when it comes to water resources, also when it comes to our environment. And that's another thing that you're advocating. So in this space, I would say that that shift in thinking is definitely happening. And the other thing I wanted to mention is about finance and delivery systems. Again, earlier one would think of finance and delivery systems as a very linear way of how do we look at just financing infrastructure, for example. Now we look at finance and delivery systems from a much larger perspective, right? How do we incorporate all the actors and all the players, both from the source to the end user and back, right? So when I say source, it's the water, whether it's a river or a lake, and the end user is you and me, is the communities, is also then the industry and the agricultural sector. And so where that concept of delivery systems is changing. Now, these are three main components when we think of how do we achieve water security or environment security, for that matter, either in an urban setting or a state setting or a national setting when we think of India. And many countries now. Some countries have achieved this much better than others. I feel like we're still at this end of that scale. We need to get somewhere here, but we're on this path. So in that sense, the space that I work in, I feel like there's I hear a lot of resonance with what you were talking about. However, as an eternally optimistic person, I feel like I'm still a little less optimistic than you are. So I have a however and a but over here, and want to connect sort of a little bit to what both Niranjan and Amrita was saying, is the concept of none of this would have happened without the state. Now, when I say without the state, I don't necessarily mean all different kinds of state levels of governance that we have across the world. It does take a certain kind of government and governance structure to make this happen, but it is ultimately that governance and government structure. It is ultimately the state that has created a new kind of thinking, along with what you would call the non-governmental actors, the private sectors, the innovators, the thinkers. that have all come together to make this movement from a very linear thinking to a non-linear thinking, from you looking at water as something to be abused to a more circular level economy and all of that. So that role of the state, and so I, in that sense, want to reiterate again Amrita's question, is that how do we then, I don't think we can get out of working with the state. I think the question here then that maybe for you to also think about a little bit, but for all of us to think about is how do we create a change in the role of the state itself? And how then does it make it, now I'm only speaking from this specific space, right, of a what one considers non-traditional security challenges, though personally I think all of these should be the top security challenges we are looking at, but they're still considered non-traditional. So that is one thing I wanted to say. And the other thing added to that then is that your point about altruism and Hobbes and human nature, I think I probably agree with Hobbes a little bit more than I do with you, but I believe that we can make that change happen. However, in this space, when we look at water security or environment or climate, the kind of innovation that we see coming out of people is a lot of times, or rather more often than not, when somebody is pushed to that brink. So the very essence of, innovation being or invention being the mother of necessity, none of that would have happened if we had this perfect sort of society to live in. So I'm not saying that we need a bad society to create innovation, but we shouldn't discount all of that that's come out of it, and sort of celebrate some of these things. So I'll stop there. I just wanted to put, some of what you were saying in the perspective of where I work, which I think it's very interesting in that sense. I have not studied a lot of these issues. I'm a political scientist, but I've studied, more conflict resolution in other spaces. So this was very, very interesting for me. I want to thank you, and also Arjun and IMPRI for putting this together, because I learned a lot. I also realized that one does some of these things in one's work without actually realizing what it is. So you've put a slightly theoretical framework to some of the work that I do. So in that sense, I wanted to thank you for this very, very interesting paper, which I have sent to many people I know who work on development economics. I think they will appreciate that.
I think that is working in core political economics, not development economics.
That's the point, right? I feel like that's the point I'm trying to make, is that I feel like people who work on development economics should also be understanding what this side of the issue is, right? Not
Absolutely.
why I'm talking about it in that one track perspective. This is why
Absolutely.
I sent it to the people who work on development economics.
Absolutely.
Not people who I know will understand what I'm saying. Everybody else needs to.
Shall I react to your points? Immediately.
That's up to Arjun.
Just add one point, since we are discussing water. In water sector, what we all can relate to, just for wider understanding. In last, especially when the Britishers came, and in India, in early 20th century, we have this municipal and other things coming upon, village panchayat, so many things. Then the municipalization of services started. Let us say water, and then user charge many things. Then privatization, so demunicipalization. Now the best welfare state, there the system is remunicipalization. So state is taking control, then private sector, then again the state. So that is also what is being experiencing. And really the politics of it, or I would say the processes, is been evolving a lot. Sarah, yes, over to you. So what also should be the creative destruction we should be thinking of? Marx really also touch upon few of those things. Yes, sir, over to you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Shall I very briefly react to what she has talked about? Yeah, I think you see this very honestly, that what is that here I am to for? Actually, is a kind of a framework, a theoretical understanding I'm developing. Now I'm working on it. I'm still working on it, and then almost is over. But then second phase I'm going to work on is feasibility, workability, and so on and so forth. Those things are there. But now coming to your questions, implementability, there are many things which are there. You think yourselves. First of all, you yourselves ask, do you agree with what I'm talking about? if you in principle agree, if you think that this is something which is very important for us to really think about or expand this idea, taking yourself to a different level of understanding altogether, then you see, if you agree with this one, now how really it could be worked, how really it could be implemented, may it be what's called water security question, or maybe delivery of finance and so on and so forth, all the nitty-gritties in practice, that in which manner it can be, in which way it can be worked out. Ultimately, your objective is to what? Any intervention that takes place, any intervention the state makes, supposed to make for the benefit of the largest majority of the people. It is supposed to mediate the interest of the people, irrespective of the fact of who belongs to which caste, who belongs to which religion, who belongs to which region. That is what the state is meant to be. And if somebody, political scientist, talks about the creation of the state, I do not want to debate how the state is created, but assuming the fact this is what the state is supposed to do, well, if this is not being done, and therefore you need to think a different kind of a dimension as to how to go about it. Here I am producing a different theoretical understanding as to how to go about it and all that. What is the lesson that you learn? What are the value systems that you really nurture? Those are the things, a very comprehensive framework, that is what. And then you look at how the nitty-gritty of implementation, how to go about it and all that. Now the state, how do you really work with the state? Well, this is the kind of a problem is there. As I told you that you need to find out as to how to work with the state. It is you who has to implement. But now if you go by what somebody's talked about, this is what the World Bank teaches you, do this way, do that way. Okay, fine. The history teaches us that you will end up with nothing. Your result will be absolutely zero. Many cases negative. So maybe positive. If you think that there is a positive kind of the, go ahead. I have no problem. But as far as I understand that you do not have such things right before you to really implement or repeat or to see something which could be done and all that. In other words, what I'm trying to say, it is the area of innovation. As I told you that, now what the country like India or the intellectuals, academics and all, let us get out of the box and seeing something very different. What India needs, not the capital immediately. Capital is required, but the lack of idea. You come out with a new idea as to how to go about it, how to resolve. If you don't agree with this kind of method or theoretical framework, come out with a different theory, different understanding, different framework of thought, and then try to solve. Question is that civilization progress is defeated, is going down. Millions of people are joining what is called the poverty group. Emancipation is must. Put the what's called co-evolution of nature and humanity. Can we do it? This is the question for us. And from that point of view, we need to really think about as to how to go about, how to implement. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor Ray. Sir, I would quickly go to our panelists to make any small remark or any clarification they have. Amrita ma'am, are you there? Would you like to add anything?
Very quickly, the other thing which I found really striking was that, since we have two political scientists on the panel, and, the whole question, there's this whole question of power. You talk of various groups in your paper, right? I mean, you say it's not gender, but capital, and that argument is well taken. But when we're talking of caste, when we're talking of class, and then, for us to move towards such a framework, it also means that the dominant groups need to give up or yield their power. And, so I was just sort of thinking what you think of the power equations and the conflict that one may think of, because when the movement, a transition to such a system, is not at the level of the individual. So yeah, I was hoping to hear a little bit about your thoughts on that.
Thank you. Dr. Sahoo, yes, quickly.
I think I broadly agree with what other discussants have said. One thing which I still do not have a clear picture is about the economics and politics of this sort of new vision of what I would call a kind of altruistic vision, which is very necessary today, because we are actually at an inflection point in terms of if you look at natural resources, the climate change and other crises that moral and crisis that we have, and the way things have degenerated. There is no doubt about it. But then look at the positive sides also cannot be completely, uh, 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 neglected or ignored. In a sense, like while you can critique about the representative democratic system, or even the way we organized our politics and society in the last 70 years, especially coming to India, you have seen also within the same system also there have been so much of social inclusion that has taken place in terms of politics of empowerment. If you look at the subaltern, the Dalits and OBCs, other groups have actually found a voice within the same representative system. If you look, you won't have seen actually in 70 years before people like Mayawati coming to the fore in a most feudal state like Uttar Pradesh and becoming something. So in a sense that also this platform also has worked in many ways. We have to see how further we can improve rather than replacing, because in a sense we have seen replacement of system, how it has also led to communist system which came with the promise of proletariat revolution and equality and everything, and then it degenerated into totalitarian. Yeah, so we have seen. So in a sense we have to see what is reasonable and what is achievable, that sort of way. And you have actually given a lot of actually hope in terms of your articulation of many of those qualities of a human, kind of, a communitarian and interdependent society, not a kind of atomistic and individualistic society that we have actually built and with consequences. So I think we need to look at very critically and carefully some of those things, and within this system, whether, which way we can make even this representative democracy more participatory, which is happening in different way, but there are pitfalls. There are many, elements which needs sharpening and, kind of way. But I think we should actually make it much more reasonable and feasible rather than looking at a kind of which I would say utopian. We should not get into a utopian idea of which is probably something in legal term not implementable. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I really studied in JNU, and I feel your pain. Because yes, it always seems yes that it's very near, but the road is quite far, especially from where we are. Even the air we are breathing here in Delhi is now just topping all the limits. Ambika ma'am, Dr. Vishwanath, yes, quickly.
Yeah, you can just Ambika is fine. I just want to add on to what Amrita had said about power. And I find it very interesting that Dr. Ray used Rajasthan as an example multiple times, I guess, because of the field work. But Rajasthan is a deeply patriarchal society still. And there are probably pockets of people who live, a life of dignity, as you mentioned, it's not the norm over there at all. And I speak as a woman, so I speak for coming from that perspective. And I think in that sense, I want to, just add on to Amrita's question of where do you see the question of power then over here? Because I would not use Rajasthan as an example to validate some of your claims at all. So I'm quite curious to see what you have to say there.
Thank you. Dr. A, should I also add few points so that you can consolidate and also give your concluding comments?
Shall I on the whole Sahoo, Professor Sahoo's comment? I just one line I just want to ask.
Sir, I'm saying that then you can consolidate.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you very much, Professor A, and for giving this idea of cohesive development, starting from also arguing for epistemological break, anti-system movements, and Zapatista movement. So many things that have. One thing I really noted that living well but not better, that philosophy also, and also the principle of homogenization, the assumption of flat world under the globalization and value capital. So many of things. A few of the things I really wanted to highlight. What again I was really envisaging, not for very near term, but really going ahead. Said Adam Smith, Wealth of the Nation. From there, theory started. Also, Romer is suggesting innovation, knowledge economy that is leading to the wealth of nation. Sir, in this, your theory, you are suggesting us what will be the role of nation, or what will be the nation, what form nation will take. Nation is a form, nation is a power. So how do you see that happening, or what do you think that is, especially during this pandemic, all the states are becoming, nations are becoming very protectionist, and international trade is something, starts just with the wealth of the nation. So that thing is also playing. Ambika ma'am really touched upon non-security threat. There are security threats which we have with China, states have with others, even individuals have with their neighbors, many things. I just wanted to add few things so that, sir, you can touch upon and reflect and enlighten us. Next, really, since we are working on China, and the role of global finance and other things also comes up. Uh, so this the role of digital currency in short term and the technology. Do you think that can be a disruptive force? Because with really the data mining and a lot of data, especially what I really understand, that the value, or what we say in economics, utils or utility, that is changing with incorporation of climate and everything. China is playing with something called, digital currency now. They are just changing. That way, few of these things are possible, because it will not be a crude money or value per se in the economy. Sir, your thoughts on that, and concluding remarks. I think I hope, sir, I try to make my questions clear to you. Professor A.
Yeah. So I just very brief comments. That's why we can respond to you. It's a very important observation. In fact, this pandemic, you see the states are coming together. Now, what happens? This is what anything which is absolutely dangerous to the life and security, the people forget their differences and then come together. That is something which you need to learn these lessons from the history of human progress.
But sir, America is leaving WHO, WTO.
America is leaving?
I'm saying that USA left WHO, multilateral, and also leaving WTO. USA, the most powerful country. So that also we learned in this pandemic.
They also learned from the pandemic. Exactly,
Yeah.
You are right. Actually, this is something which, what does it teach? That today, say for example, you had a Kyoto Protocol 2012. If you learn from the history, Kyoto Protocol was something which is there. See, the climate change is something which is creating a havoc all over the world. It's not the India, maybe relatively less big and all that. Now, some of the 6 countries, they are the most, what's called space, 90% of the space being captured by these summits. So Kyoto Protocol was wanted to break the monopoly, and then wanted to accord the what is called right for all the rest of the countries to use this kind of thing. So the CO2 emission, some countries should stop the CO2 emission and give the compensation. Some sort of agreement was there. It's destroyed. It is destroyed, but the same, I can tell you, take it from me, that again, the entire society, world society will have to come together like what they have come together to the pandemic day. They're forgetting what the differences between the countries are there, because the life is a danger. So if any solution right at the doorstep is there, come what may, accept it, for the life is in danger. Such kind of situation, again, in the climate change is going to be there, and then again, people will come together. In other words, this kind of solidarity, this kind of mutual respect, this kind of mutual help to each other is something getting conditioned by the kind of what's called depth of the problem that people have been facing, something of that kind. But I am saying that this is what is seen overtly, but there are certain things which are not being seen very overtly, explicitly, but things have been going on. It is precisely where, look at the rural India, look at the many parts of the country, it is something which is there. Is a clear-cut kind of what a dehumanization of a different form, different kinds have been going on. Now, not only that, even the power that is talked about, power. Yes, power. Not only power is something which is central to all development process. The powerless people, powerlessness in terms of caste, gender, race, economy, all types of powerlessness that is there. You need to address them together. You need to see that all the powerless people are there together. It's something you need to preach. This is what exactly it's. You need to fight a giant which is really discriminating the people. The power people will want to give, not give the power to you, powerless people. So this is the crux of the problem. Now, how do you really do it? Not that you just go and fight, and I'm not talking about that. How do you go about it is something that needs to be decided by you. But first of all, my question is that I am trying to identify this is the crux of the problem and emphasizing on that. You need to really bring all this together. Don't talk about class people or the class analysis. No, it is not like that. It is not only the economic exploitation, but the social exploitation. I call it a deprivation, all deprivation people, deprivation of the power of different kinds, all to be together to see that they are really having a kind of a common platform to say, this is how, in democratic way, to say what is to be done, what is not to be done. That's something which is to be there. And thirdly, that, one more thing that representative democracy versus this one. Why not, Professor Sahoo, have a debate, have a seminar? What is good and what is bad? Let there be debate on that. Question is that there are representative democracy or talking about representation, which are doing fantastic. Well, fine, hail them. Ask them, I salute them. Learn something from them. And how it is possible within the given system, they are able to do this kind of thing. Well, if that is the case, you have a kind of reformation, it is possible, go ahead. I have nothing like rigidity in understanding. Question, it has to be there in Latin America, it has happened, in some countries it has happened, and therefore it happened. No, it is not like that. We have something of this kind, and we also see the pitfalls of that situation, how to rectify that one, how to go ahead with something different. That is something, a suggestion. If you really find something good with the representative democracy in some cases, where there is social exclusion has been diminished quite considerable extent, learn the externals from them, how to go about it. In other words, we need to have a system where this representative democracy really try to solve the problem of the people, of the majority of the people. That is what exactly it's all about. If it fails to do it, reject it. If it does it very well, accept it, see that is being what's called glorified, see that is being, we are learning lessons from how it is possible for us to do, and then it can be theorized at a different level altogether of understanding. If that is possible for us to do this one, it's a kind of open debate that I'm throwing up. It's a kind of open, I'm claimed to have thought of something very different kind of thing. And this is precisely, I'm fully convinced that if you have to now question the implementability, there are varieties of what is called ifs and bars and nots and all kinds of things could be there, all that. It's not that. It's not easily implementable, everything. Now, a situation will tell how it could be implemented. A situation will say, the practical situation will say that how it could be implemented, how the resolution can be done, how really it's possible for us to ultimately what matters, emancipation of the people. Is the powerless people to be quite powerful? It is the powerless people who should be really given the right to exercise their power. They should learn how to live with the dignity. This is precisely the question, and that is precisely we need to address. Either you call our democratic representative democracy, or call it this way or this way, finally you have to do. But then the kind of system that I'm talking about, kind of system that is there already, you need to really fight against those are the basic parameters of the system. You go on not talking anything about it and go on talking about sustainable development that you're talking about, that UNDP and all this. I consider, I had a debate with these people, long debate on this one. I'm telling openly, that is what the debate. Tell me how it is possible for you to, if you do not change the logic of capital. If you have to, you cannot address the logic. What is the logic of capital? If you remain that logic of capital intact, no reformation, no change of that kind of thing, and you go on talking about sustainable development, how is it possible for you to achieve the sustainable development? Look at that, what happened in 2015, something they wanted to achieve, 2015. I'm forgetting that scheme, throughout the world, failed miserably. It miserably failed. Again, they have got the sustainable goal, SDG and all that. Can never happen. Because there is no logic of it, because you are not changing the system, and you are dreaming that something sustainable can happen. And then metabolic order that I talked about, you need to change, you need to see what metabolic order that is very important for you to have, not only India, throughout the world. If you have the big factories, all processing and all that, retrieving the natural resources, consuming the resources at accelerating rate and all that, and using them, depleting the production conditions. I was with the World Bank team for quite some time. And then we estimated, and I found that by 2050, the resources that you have, the renewable resources, non-renewable resources, is going to be exhausted totally. And that's open now, everybody knows. Non-renewable resources, renewable resources are also getting at stake. So all production, Production means surplus, surplus means profit, profit means accumulation of capital, and that logic goes on, that logic goes on. And that is going to be the 2050, that's one. Somebody said that, well, there is a big conflict between us. How this estimation could be done? How is it possible for us to, is wrong, good, bad, and all kinds of discussion. Somebody sarcastically, do whatever you can, because by that time we all dead. No problem. Yes, sir. Question is that, what I'm trying to say that, it is a very uncertain kind of situation we are putting ourselves. And then this kind of thing, we need to really think about how to go about. Look at this, Copenhagen. Look at this, another climate change kind of. Do you think this government of America is going to accept this one? It never accepted. And we will never accept this kind of thing. Stand. And then I do not want to explain what happened to the Copenhagen. What happened to Copenhagen, the summit and all that. One after another climate. And at the same time, you see this, the kind of change that's taking place. Well, I would say that unless and until death is right at the doorstep invading you, we will not come together. It's like that. That is what pandemic talked about. But I'm saying that no, before that happens, let us be conscious about this. Let us change the paradigm. Let us think something different. As you know, that is what say we in Buen Vivik teaches us. Let us live well, but not live better. That is something which is very important for us. It means that our thinking process, it means that the parameters have changed. It means that basic epistemological thought, epistemology of development or development has to be different. And unless and until we have a different epistemology, different thought process, different parameters of change, different parameters of understanding and standard of living, it is impossible for us to, and we'll go on tinkering with 10% growth, 5% growth, 9% growth, 6% growth, that kind of dynamics, which has no meaning to the people, millions and millions of people of the world. This is what I wanted to say. Let us explain, let us explore how really we can think something very different. It is possible, not that I'm saying it's perfectly 100%. No. It is my intention is to see, explore an area which possibly can give a space for the people, the majority of the people to breathe properly and keep the head high while surviving. This is exactly the point. And this is where the cohesive development, the paradigm that I'm thinking about is something maybe able to, and to the best of my understanding, will give you the only solution that no other thing. Just tell me in pandemic, if there is no cohesion, if there is no solidarity between the people, is it possible for any government, whether good or bad, anarchic or whatever it may be, will be able to resolve this crisis? No, it can never be. So this can be testified based on what this pandemic teaches us. Thank you so much. This much I can tell you at the moment.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor A. Dr. Upendra, would you like to add anything now? It's almost last time.
It's very good. And I think we have a discussion at length, and we should really welcome what is the findings of Professor A based on his research and his thoughtful research related to alternative development paradigm. So yeah, it's true. Maybe just looking from his lens is fine. He has covered lot many things. It may happen in Rajasthan the issues has been covered and all. It may happen looking to the findings, maybe the situation may be change in West Bengal, maybe change in Kerala, and maybe that can happen. I think that is not an issue, and maybe that can be taken care of. And I think one very good thing, it's the finding is very positive and maybe negative kind of things for various stakeholders. But the important thing is how to use this alternative model, because we are more as a we are also into the intervention and all. So we will just also use these findings maybe at our field level also to see how that can be, because although Professor A is a part of ours and certainly is also directing us to really work on the issues and all. But based on this finding, we will also try to apply at field level, and let's see how it can be taken care of. And maybe because ultimately the findings can be because as per our experience of working in the development sector, maybe the customized kind of things can be done at the individual level, maybe the institution level, and maybe some project level. Custom, because based on findings, some customized can be done. I think it's not an issue. Finally, I think very lot many issues have, I think from various panelists, lot many I think good thoughts has been taken care of and come up more related to political dynamism and all. So I think, yeah, again, it is a kind of, it can be debated, but yeah, it is also an important aspect that can be maybe taken care of. Finally, I should really thankful to Arjun ji. Really, we have a very good discussion, and thankful to Professor A. He's really come out with very encouraging findings and very thoughtful process he has. And I think I know Professor Ray since almost last 26-27 years. So basically, because we had been to his findings and all earlier in the year 2000, in 95-96, when he has come out with some wool model of institution building and all, and that has worked very well. And we have really shown some model to the state also. So yeah, so I think again we are thankful to Professor Ray for his research findings on alternative development paradigm. And from my side, I also thankful to the whole panel of experts who has given very good his remark. And thankful to Arjun ji for really taking up this discussion. This is from my side. And then it's again to Arjun ji.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank, thank you, Upemji, and really highlighting this aspect, last but not at the least, as practitioner, what sir is also suggesting for institution at all levels to play. And I hope under your leadership, we have more models, live model experiments of Professor Ray to demonstrate to world, I would rather say. That has really taken example from physics to biology, many things which I found very interesting, as we all Indians are argumentative and we love politics a lot. A lot of questions and discussion also. Yes. But really the essential and science part of understanding of this was something very unique. And what also Ambika ma'am really highlighted, that this kind of optimism coming from your generation is something we really have to think upon, and especially in producing ideas. Moreover, sir, you also touched upon that these things are also spiritual. Earlier, I thought to bring it later, but I will give you a call and learn more. Uh, Dr. Sahoo also highlighted the current problem of scale, and how the NGO and civil society, those things are coming very pertinent points in execution, and all the questions we are raising. But let me take this opportunity to propose a vote of thanks. And we are really thankful for everyone who will be watching it also later to learn from the life work of Professor Sunil Ray on this special lecture on birth of an alternative development paradigm, cohesive development, which is organized by Impact and Policy Research Institute, New Delhi, and Center for Development, Communication and Studies, CDECS, Jaipur. So once again, let me thank the panelists for today, Professor Sunil Ray, of course, and we are also thankful to ICAS MP and their support. I am sure many of them would be watching that. So thank you also for supporting for this event as well. And let me thank our panelists, Dr. Amrita Datta, Dr. Niranjan Sahoo, Dr. Ambika Vishwanath. Dr. V. Kalyan Shankar could not join because some issues back home. And also let me thank Dr. Upendra Singh ji for encouraging us and guiding us to hold this event and facilitating this event on this, I would say, a very different topic would that no civil society would touch upon. So thank you also for your leadership. Yes, and have a nice day.
Thank you.
Thank you a lot. Thank you very much.